Hi, my name is Emily Montgomery, and I am the program coordinator in International and Academic English at the University of California in Davis. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to use Microsoft Teams for remote learning and collaboration, specifically within the context of an ITA program. So since UC Davis is on the quarter system, we actually have already delivered a full term completely online since we started quarantine just as the winter quarter was ending. So before the spring quarter started, we knew that we would need to come up with some ways to deliver our coaching program online, as well as deliver our oral proficiency testing online. But since we don't do testing until the end of the quarter, our coaching program was the first priority. And I'm not going to go too into detail about our coaching program itself, since I want to get to the part on just using Microsoft Teams. But basically in this program, current and prospective multilingual TAs can participate in one-on-one sessions with an undergraduate coach and or in group sessions with me. So the coaches and I needed to be able to meet with students in one-on-one sessions and in group sessions online. And we also needed to be able to share some materials with each other and also with our students. Traditionally, each coach has a binder with sections for all of their students, and that lives by my desk. So that's our simple way of collaborating, but that doesn't really work when everything is happening remotely. So we needed a solution for sharing materials remotely with each other. And then finally, we needed some kind of mechanism for ongoing coach training and supervision, which usually involves weekly team meetings, group training activities, tracking of the hours they worked and their students' attendance and things like that. So of course, there are several tools that can accomplish the task that I just described. I could use Zoom for the coaching sessions. I could use our course Canvas site for organizing materials. I could use Google Docs or Dropbox for sharing files. We could use Slack for, collaboration and group conversations. But I didn't want to have my student employees and my grad students to have to learn multiple different platforms and kind of figure out what we were using for what. So we decided to just use Teams. And I hadn't used Teams at all prior to this, but after I toyed around with it some, I saw that it could handle almost all the tasks I needed it to. And since I thought it would be easier to have students just learn one platform, we decided to go with Teams. And so I'll show you how we have basically been using it in our programs so that you can get an idea for how it works. And I'll also just point out that there is a web version of Teams, so you can use it just in your browser. And there are also desktop, Apple, and Android apps. But all of the screenshots and videos that I'll show you here will be from the desktop app. So when I open up Teams, I see icons for all the teams that I'm a part of, and each team has its own members and settings. So I'm using Teams for my communication with undergrad coaches. We have our weekly team meetings here. We share resources with each other, brainstorm things, share announcements here. I use it for communication with my coworkers, the other staff in our program, for delivering our one-on-one coaching sessions online, for delivering our group coaching sessions, and finally for our ITA testing. And so an organization may have multiple teams within it, and then each team will have multiple channels within it. And so, think about if you had a team for your ITA program and your coworkers, your channels might be things like, our testing, our budget, our course, things like that. So you kind of organize things within those channels. And then each channel has a place for posts for conversations, files, and then other tabs that you can add to customize it for your own purposes. And by default, every member of a team is also a member of each of those channels, unless you set the channel up to be private. and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. So this is an example of a team from my presentation skills group sessions I did last quarter. All of the students were in this team, and we had this like main general channel, which is just by default created anytime you make a new team. So for our group sessions, everyone met just here in this general channel. I just needed to click this button to start the meeting. And usually whenever you do this, you see your video that you're about to share. You can't see it right now because I'm using my webcam for recording, but you would start the session right here, and then there will be a new button added here to the channel that allows other users to come and join the session that you started. And so you can also, everyone can join just by clicking that button and adding themselves, but you can also invite people who haven't joined yet by manually adding them. And so a couple of things to note, when I started using Teams, you could only see 4 speakers at a time, or 4 of the like meeting participants. There wasn't a full gallery view like there is on Zoom. But they have been updating a lot of their features in the past few months. They recently changed it so that you can see 9, and I did read that they will be updating it so that you can see up to 49 soon. But if you are using it for larger groups, just note that it doesn't have the gallery view in quite the same way that Zoom does. And I do also want to point out that there's a lot of documentation on using Teams from Microsoft, but also that they've been adding a lot of features recently, which is great, but sometimes the documentation doesn't reflect the most recent updates. So just keep that in mind. So here under the Posts tab, I could share announcements. I can see the history of our meetings. If I look at a particular meeting, I can see who joined that session, who all attended. Another thing that was helpful was to post a poll here. So this is created using one of the third-party apps called Poly, and there's lots of different apps that you can integrate into Teams. I would just advise that you consider whether or not students will have to create a separate login to use those apps, since they'll be much more likely to use them if they don't have to log into a separate account. But in this one, their responses are just recorded using their Teams account, which for us is also tied to their UC Davis like Office 365 accounts that all of our students and staff have. And I assume that it would work similarly for other campuses who also provide those Microsoft accounts. And you can also choose if you want to record your meetings, and it will automatically add the meeting recording to the channel posts. You can play it directly here in Teams, or you can go to the Microsoft Stream website and download the file if you want to do that. In the Files section, I shared just any documents that I wanted to share with them. This is basically the same as Google Docs, where everyone in the channel can download or edit the documents, except it's just using Microsoft Office apps instead of Google Docs. You can edit files here in Teams. Or you can open them in Microsoft Word separately as well. I also had a tab for our weekly plan. And then I also had this tab that we just used for a group activity one time. This is another third-party app called Stormboard that you can add. And you can think of it as basically a collaborative workspace that mimics group activities, where maybe you would have students write ideas on Post-it notes or organize index cards or something like that, but they can all collaborate, they can all write, add notes, add new add new ideas to the board all at one time. Now I'll show you how we used Teams for our one-on-one sessions. And so here everyone was in the main general channel, and then I made a private channel for each student and coach pair. So the content of those channels was only visible to them and to me since I'm the team owner. So one thing I liked with Teams was that I could see when their meetings happened. So if there were ever any questions about a student's attendance, we had that to refer back to. And then they also had files that laid out their personalized coaching plan for the quarter, their coaching schedule, and other things like that. Finally, some of them added other apps too, like this whiteboard, Quizlet, Stormboard, or Flipgrid, OneNote notebooks. Several different things that could be handy to use can be added here. I will just comment on this whiteboard real quick though. There is a default Microsoft whiteboard in Teams, but it's not very fun to use because it doesn't have a typing tool. So we sometimes used this app, which is called InVision. One nice thing about it is that each participant is given a different color. And so you can see who added notes by color. So you can see our coach's notes were in pink and the students' notes were in purple. You can also save the whiteboards in this app and you can come back to review them later. But my main complaint with this whiteboard is that you have to have a separate account to use it. It is free, but it's just kind of one additional thing to do to get started in the beginning of a session, which is a little bit annoying sometimes. This summer though, in my one-on-one sessions I'm doing with some students, I've just been using OneNote, so Microsoft OneNote, as a whiteboard, and I like that much better. The students don't have to create a separate account, and you can both write and draw at the same time. And we can organize the pages in a notebook so that it's easy to refer back to vocabulary or other items from previous weeks. And then finally, the chat feature. So I've been using the chat feature a lot to try to cut down on having so many emails. I've used it a lot with my coworkers, with my student employees, and also with students. You can also do a video chat here from the chat and share files just with the other person you're chatting with. And you can also have a chat with multiple people at a time if you need to do that. You can also see a couple icons here on the left, but I haven't used them much. There's this assignments one, which apparently there's a Microsoft Teams education version that I suppose functions a little bit more similarly to an LMS like Canvas or Blackboard, but I don't have that version at my campus, so I can't really tell you very much about it. There is also this calendar feature, which syncs with your Outlook calendar, and you can use that to calendar future Teams meetings. So it will like create a URL directly from Outlook and add this to your Outlook calendar. I do use this feature for meetings with my coworkers who also use Teams, but since all of our students mostly use Google Calendar, I don't use that with them. And lastly, I'll just point out a couple of notes related to our ITA testing in Teams. And we did several trial versions and Teams versus Zoom, me and my undergrad coaches, and we all found the audio quality to be a little bit more consistent in Teams, and also that it was easier to move our test takers from a check-in session to a testing room. But we were also prepared to use Zoom in case there were any issues. And we did have a handful of students who we needed to to offer the test to them on Zoom. And so it was still pretty easy to move them over to that platform. We just sent the URL to them in the chat in Teams. And so they were still able to check in Teams and go through the check-in process there, but then actually complete their exam in Zoom. So that is basically how we've been using Teams. So far, it's been a super helpful platform for us, and students have been able to pick up how to use it quite quickly. I think it's even quite likely that we'll continue to use Teams for several purposes, even after we're able to return to in-person instruction. And I hope this presentation may have given you some ideas on how your program may be able to use Teams. And we will be holding a live Q&A session for all of these webinars on online tools on August 15th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern. And at that time, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I hope to see you then.